Well, welcome along everybody, live on Facebook. We're coming live to you from the Bolton Methodist Mission. Just to tell you we've got a big audience here. A round of applause everybody, please.
Yeah, very good.
And we're in the company tonight of Greater Manchester's first elected mayor, 7 months into the gig now, thereabouts. So just briefly, how do you think you're doing?
I'll probably let everybody here be the judge of that, Kevin. I'm enjoying it. It's challenging, but that's what the job's all about. I don't miss Westminster at all. It's it really is. It's a great job, and actually, through these events we've been doing, it really helps, I think, us change politics a bit and get it closer to people. I just want to say a massive thank you actually to all of you for turning out on this cold night. Who needs a ticket to Peter Kay when you can come and watch this for free, eh? So it's and a huge thanks to you, Kevin, as I say again, for doing it.
My pleasure. And this week, every different week, it seems like there's other big topics that you're announcing plans. You've got plans. Clearly, you're a few months into it, and there's a lot of work to be done. This week, a big announcements on transport for the buses, particularly yesterday, and also on cycling tomorrow. Just briefly tell us what you've been up to this week. Yeah,
well, if anybody looks at my Twitter timeline, I'd recommend it to you on a morning. Just look at what people are tweeting me. I'm getting people's commutes now in kind of real time, pictures of it, but I think it's a good thing because we've not had a situation before, have we, without an elected mayor, where people had a kind of way in which to kind of get over their concerns, and that's the point of the role, isn't it? That I can kind of hear those concerns from all over Greater Manchester and then do something with it. So transport, I think, I'd be interested to hear what you all think, but it's not good enough, is it? Got colleagues from Transport for Greater Manchester here tonight. I think our bit of it probably works the best, Metrolink, but if you look across the rest of it, the buses aren't good enough, the roads are completely seized up, and I don't need to tell anyone in here about rail services, given the state of them recently. So the thing is, these transport services aren't good enough individually on their own, but because of the way they are, Kevin, they can't integrate to make this system work as one system. And really, I've kind of been watching it for the first 7 months, and I've kind of really come to that conclusion that we need a major overhaul of transport in Greater Manchester, so we can improve each of these services individually, but then make them knit together as a coherent system. So that's what I've said this week. I don't have power over all of them, but what I am going to do in the new year is create a Mayor's Transport Board, where I can get the likes of Network Rail, Highways England, the train operators, the bus operators, in our building every other month or so, and hold them to account for what is happening. We've seen the smart motorway project just go on and on and on and on. Who's been holding them to account for the people here who's been suffering as a result? And that's what I'm going to do, alongside start reforming our buses, investing in cycling, I can say more about that, and really trying to get the whole thing working better.
All right, well, on this topic, have we got Graham Cooper here? Graham Cooper's got one of the questions. Just hang fire, Graham, we'll come over with a mic. And we want you to speak nice and clearly into the mic. If you're part of an organisation, just explain briefly what that is, and then straight into your question if you would do.
Yeah, I'm a Bolton resident. I'm also a member of the Greater Manchester Cycling Campaign, which I'm fairly active in. My question really does relate to congestion, and I was interested to see in the announcement for the Urban Regeneration Fund money, 234 million, I think. You put congestion as one of the key things. Yeah. And one of the things that, as a cycle campaigner, that we know from research all over the world is that building more roads doesn't solve congestion, it just makes it worse. Yeah. But what we really need, in our view, is to increase make it easier for people to adopt walking and cycling for those journeys that are quite short. Could you say something about the plans on that?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. You were nearly right. We got £243 million in the budget, which was welcome. We're grateful to the government for that. It's the Transforming Cities Fund. So, I've been debating now with the leaders about how we spend that. If we were just to spend it on roads, I don't think we would solve the congestion problem. And why is congestion such an issue? Well, it obviously impacts on people's quality of life. It impacts on productivity, because people are getting late to work. But it's the single biggest driver of poor air quality, or where air is in breach of legal limits around Greater Manchester. It's because of traffic congestion. So we've got to do something about it. And a big part of the answer, I think, is creating a world-class cycling infrastructure. Not just the white lines on the road, proper separated cycle lanes, safe cycle lanes. So I brought Chris Boardman in early on to advise us on that. And his report is being published tomorrow. So Chris will publish his report as our first cycling and walking commissioner. He made me gulp when he said what we needed to spend, 1.5 billion, according to Chris, if we're to give all of Greater Manchester that high-quality cycling infrastructure that we need. But he says that could be done over a decade. So the challenge is therefore 150 million a year. With the leaders around Greater Manchester, we've agreed that we are going to devote a major proportion of the Transforming Cities Fund to building that cycling and walking infrastructure around Greater Manchester, and we'll be making that announcement tomorrow. So good news, I think, from your point of view on the way. But, this is about everyone's future, isn't it? If I'm looking at the best investment I can make in terms of transport, I think it's got to be in cycling infrastructure, because it brings benefits on so many levels.
All right, thank you for that, Graham. If anybody's got a question on transport, fire your hand up. Right, we can just come over here. Wait till the mic comes over. Just introduce yourself.
I'm Chris Nash. I'm also a Bolton resident. Following on from that very sensible question, we're blessed with river valleys going right into Manchester, in Bolton. In fact, most of Greater Manchester's geography favours off-road cycling.
Yeah.
So how about making more use of our green spaces, putting cycle routes off-road through our river valleys, making more use of the green space, far more pleasant for cycling, far more pleasant for walking. Health agenda is improved for that as well. So making use of our river valleys and getting safer and better quality routes that way.
Well, I think you made a really excellent point. I think we've got to learn from what happened in London. So London has built infrastructure, and the lesson there is if you build safe infrastructure, people will use it. So there is proof that it works. But they often, I think, had situations where they were kind of pitching the motorist against the cyclist for the road space, and that isn't always, in my view, the best way to go. We are blessed with a lot of industrial infrastructure, old railway lines, canal towpaths, the river valleys, as you say. And actually what you're saying is the same argument that an organisation called City of Trees are making. They're a body that's trying to plant, I think, 3 million more trees around Greater Manchester. And they're saying we need high-quality green cycleways into some of our areas of natural beauty. And I think that they're absolutely right, onto something. So maybe some of this investment I've just spoken about could go into those schemes that are not necessarily about digging up the roads, but converting industrial infrastructure, old industrial infrastructure, into really high quality cycling paths. And I'm open to those ideas. I'm setting what I'm doing as a challenge fund. So we're going to set our money up at the GM level as a challenge fund, and it will then be for councils to kind of say to us, well, if we'd like to do this scheme, if we invest this much, can we get match funding from your challenge fund? So that's how we're trying to turn our fund into a bigger fund and really drive some change. So yeah, we're very much interested in what you're saying.
Any more questions on transport around the room? We've got one just down here. Wait for the mic. It's on its way. There it is.
Right, so sorry about this. I can talk with that, but I can't sign as well, but it's okay. Accessibility for disabled people on transport, on all transport. And it's not just the deaf, because you can't hear, it's the deaf-blind, people using scooters, people using wheelchairs, the elderly getting on and off, walking on and off. It needs all to be accessible. I think trams are, but buses and trains aren't. And also, we've got the extra thing now with buggies on board buses, and I have known that they've got 3 buggies on the bus with people, with babies, and then a wheelchair has been left at the bus stop. So it needs to be sorting everybody, because you're saying you want to get the disabled into work, but they also need to get to work to get those jobs.
You've just made the person sitting next to you so happy, I can't tell. It's Bob Morris. transport for Greater Manchester. But I think they do deserve credit because all Metrolink stops are fully accessible and the trams are easy to get on and off. Does everybody realise this? The train stations in Greater Manchester, we've got 98 train stations. Over half of them are not wheelchair accessible. Over half. How can they justify that? We had put in a bid to the government to have devolved control of all of our rail stations because they're not just inaccessible, they're dark, they're dreary, they're not properly used, but they've turned that down. And it's very frustrating, to be honest, because on what basis is the status quo acceptable? That's what they seem to be saying to us. To me, it's not. The stations should be under our control so that we can improve them. So I completely agree with you. But the main thing I feel I can do in the next few years to meet your challenge and your very proper challenge in the question is change the buses. So due to what the leaders of Greater Manchester called for when they signed the devolution deal, i.e. the power to re-regulate our buses, we now have an Act of Parliament that we can use. And I said yesterday that we are going to use it. Buses in Greater Manchester are going to change. Make no mistake about that.
Andy, just explain the timetable for that. So these new powers kick in next week. How quickly are you going to make changes to the bus network? I mean, this could take a number of years, couldn't it?
Yes, it will. And it's always one of those things. I don't want to be sitting here tonight saying, it's all going to get better quick, and then it doesn't happen. We've got a process to go through where we've got to consult on what we're actually planning to do. And that will take the best part of, it will take next year. I've said to TFGM, and they've accepted this, we're going to make a final decision by the end this time next year on what we're going to do to reform the buses in Greater Manchester. But I said yesterday, they're going to be more affordable. They're going to cover all areas, so we're not going to have estates just left without services. They're going to be accessible with ramps on them, audio-visual announcements, as you rightly say, for people who are blind or visually impaired or can't hear, deaf. There's going to be information on the buses, as there is in London, real-time information in terms of when the next services are coming, and also, cleaner engines, but also the same livery, the same colour on the buses. Because I think one of the problems that we've got is it looks like a jumble, doesn't it? You don't know what's a bus and what's a coach and what... and it actually affects people's confidence in the place, doesn't it, when you can't see where the public transport is operating. So we're going to go for a system that will be much more integrated with Metrolink. So if you buy a ticket to get somewhere, it could probably take in your bus and your Metrolink journey. And that's what London have got, it's what we should have, and it will have the highest standards of accessibility. Because in this day and age, it's not acceptable that some members of the public cannot use public transport.
How are you going to actually get the buses moving, though? Because we talk about too many motorists, too much congestion. Those buses are stuck in that congestion, aren't they? So people aren't going to be pleased if you start building more bus lanes. So you get more people on the buses, but those buses are still stuck in the congestion, aren't they?
Well, we have invested in a lot of bus lanes, and there's been criticism of that, but the buses do move as a result of that, and they're not as affected by the congestion. What we've got to do is just make them better, make them more affordable. It can cost over £3 to go on a bus in Greater Manchester. In London, the fare is capped at £1.50, and if you jump off a bus and get on another one within an hour, you don't pay at all. They have a daily cap on what you can spend on bus and tube in London. Here, you just carry on paying every time you use it. So we're going to do all of these things. They won't happen immediately, but starting next year, later next year, we will have contactless, ticketless payment on Metrolink. So we are moving in that direction. People often say, well, why can't we have an Oyster card like London? Why have we not got one now? The answer is quite simple. I'm not making a political point. In my view, this is just a fact. When Margaret Thatcher deregulated the buses in the mid-80s, she gave us a free-for-all. So we've had companies that are just doing their own thing, charging their own fares, got their own ticketing system. So you can't integrate this system. It can't speak the same language. And what we've got the chance here with these new powers is to completely change things so that it is one system and they all have to do the same thing. We standardise the fare structure, and then we can start to have properly integrated ticketing.
All right, we'll move topic now because we've got a lot to get through. Very quick, last question on transport here.
What you've just been talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Just
right, two very quick questions and then we'll move topic.
Okay, just one thing on that, Andy. A lot of people here tonight are hearing about this Metrolink. Are we going to expect it come to Bolton at some time in the next 20 years?
Yep, all right, wait, Andy. We'll take this next question.
You saved me there, Kevin.
We'll answer that. We'll take this next question as well. We'll answer these together, then we'll move on.
Network Circle for Deafness. And what we've just been talking about with these buses, are you going to teach them some sort of management? Because if you come up to Bolton on this bus services round here, they're there, they're not there, there's 3 or 4 running together, then they're taking them out of service. This is what the lady said here, this is why people can't get on buses, because you're taking services off and not running them proper. And that's what I'm saying, go in that station and watch them. They pull in, out of service, and one goes, you wait for the next one. So that next one's got to take 2 lots of passengers. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It wants a damn good look at that service because it's wrong. It's not managed proper.
It wants an overhaul, as I said, and
an overhaul.
to be honest, you know, it's really important to say this. TFGM have got very limited powers at the moment to do anything about it. The bus companies hold all the cards. They can just withdraw services at the drop of a hat, and no one can tell them that they can't do it. They can charge what they like, and they're holding all the power. So this kind of free market in buses has given us a situation where the private interest has kind of held sway over the public interest, and that's what we're saying. That's going to change. You know, I do need to sort of praise them because they're doing their bit well, in my view. Not just Metrolink. Bolton Interchange is a Transport for Greater Manchester project, but at the moment it's a great facility, but it hasn't got the good services to match it. So they're coming, is what I'm saying.
And on the Metrolink?
Metrolink with us
next week.
In Lee and Wigan, I think we feel the same. You know, we know how you feel. We share the pain, but we want to expand Metrolink, absolutely. We want to make some orbital links in Metrolink. I would love to see it come to Bolton. I can't say to you tonight that definitely here's the plan, this is how we'll do it. But yes, I would like to do that if I can find a way of funding it.
All right, thank you for those questions. Right, we got Stuart Gerrard in the room. He's over at the back there.
I thought you would say Stephen Gerrard for a minute.
No.
That's my brother, that. Hi, Andy. The Town Centre initiative, what you announced. I'm chairman of the Atherton Residents Association, as you may know.
Yep.
But it's been announced by Wigan Council they're nominating Lee for the initiative. We feel that that's the wrong decision because Lee's already got the momentum which you stipulated and got a lot of earmarked projects in the pipeline. So I'm just wondering, what kind of a knock-on effect would that have on towns like Atherton who have just been left behind for the last 40 years now with Wigan Council? And will this have any impact, help improve Atherton's town centre and its local economy? Because it's unfortunately dwindling away, and I'm hoping this could have the kickstart it needs.
Well, obviously I know Atherton well, and obviously know Lee well. Just for those who don't know about it, when you hear that phrase town centre challenge, let me just explain very quickly what that is. You'll all remember the debate about the spatial framework and the controversy, and maybe some people will want to raise that tonight. When I came in as mayor, I felt we needed to fundamentally refocus our approach. We were too developer-led in my view, so we had a spatial framework that was going straight to the green sites by the roads for commuter homes and wasn't building the right homes in the right places, closer to transport infrastructure as we've just been talking about. So what I've done is, I've launched what I call a town centre challenge, and I invited all 10 boroughs to nominate a town that can receive focused attention from me and all of the other public and private landowners in that town, with a particular interest in building more homes there, higher density homes that people can afford. Because with the best will in the world, places like Lee, Atherton, and there are places in Bolton as well you could put in that list, they're not going to be the retail destinations that they once were. So they're kind of clinging on to retail space that actually they can't really fill, so it gets the pound shops, the charity shops, and we know that story. So the Town Centre Challenge is a process whereby we're going to take a real proper look at a town, working with the housing providers and others, and see if we can kind of begin to remodel those places, perhaps bring younger people in to live in them, and then you bring some new life into the town, more bars, restaurants, that kind of thing. So each borough was able to nominate its town, and the Wigan Borough have chosen Lee. Now, that was their decision. However, as the former MP for Lee, I would say, yes, Lee has had some investment, but it's not been in the town centre. The town centre is still struggling, or has struggled. But here's where I can offer you something. I don't see it as these 10 towns and then that's it. If I can prove the concept that there is a market for building more modern flats in town centres, I'm ready to go to another round of Town Centre Challenge. And Atherton, in my view, would have a very strong case as part of that. So that's where my thinking is going. This isn't 10 and then that's it. Absolutely not. You know, we've got the 10 because they've probably got the most potential to go first. But we will definitely come asking for more if boroughs want to work with us on that.
If anyone's got a question on this area, put your hands up. But on that, there's no money particularly, is there? But you do have, as Mayor, some extra powers, do you, on compulsory purchase? What is there that you can actually do to help?
So, possibly is some money. We're in the business of the kind of final stages of agreeing a housing deal with the government. So, we are potentially going to get some new money for land remediation, because some of the sites in the brownfield area are contaminated, and private developers often can't afford to do that clean-up. So that's one area we might have some new money. We do have a Greater Manchester Housing Investment Fund, so there is potential to support schemes through that. But yeah, one of the main ways I can help, Kevin, is using the powers that come with this role. So in the past, before we had a mayor, Greater Manchester didn't have the ability to intervene in big planning decisions in the same way. Now, I could create what's called a mayoral development corporation and then have powers of compulsory purchase to clear sites for development. So it allows us to be more interventionist with planning and housing. So going to the areas that are well located but perhaps have been difficult because of the issues around viability. I can help clear those sites and then get public-private partnerships together that might then redevelop them. And that is a big change. In the past, we've had an approach where it's been a bit too private developer-led in my view. And this allows us to become more interventionist in our approach. And that's what I fully intend to do. We've got to build the right homes in the right places.
Oh, question down here, yeah.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Comrie from the Blair Project. One of the things that I've been impressed by Liverpool City Council is they've had a scheme for a long time where residents buy a house for £1 and then they can do it up. They've recently announced, I believe, that they're setting up their own building contracting company in order to bring back into use. I mean, there are lots of empty buildings, like in Plattbridge, there's an empty former police station, I think it is. And I know lots of local people who'd love to spend the time to do it up and bring it back into use. And I just wondered to what extent that something could be done in Greater Manchester on a par with what Liverpool are doing, where you're giving people the opportunity to have housing, but they can take their time and do it up and bring back these properties into use.
I know something of that scheme, and you're right, it's a really great initiative. But I think where it comes from is where there was real housing failure. So, terraces where every property was empty and nobody would dream of buying them. So the question was, knock them down, and that's where that came from. I'm thinking now that I don't know whether we've got anything quite as bad as that in Greater Manchester. We've got areas that are challenged and there's poor condition of properties in some areas, but I don't think we've got the same housing market failure, if you like, on that same basis. So the idea is a good one, and I would be open to it if we had the same properties that we could use in that way.
Now, clearly, where houses were going to be built was a huge discussion ahead of your election, and the spatial framework is a massive issue for lots of people, isn't it? Yep. The spatial framework, I'm sure people will know, but this is Greater Manchester's plan to decide where they're going to build houses, where they're going to have business sites in the coming decades. We've got Kevin Bennett in the room. You've got a question on this topic generally, haven't you? Is Kevin here? Right, it might be that Kevin's not here, so I'll just rattle through Kevin's question. So, he's talking about the spatial framework. He says, we're very seriously overloaded in Horwich with housing developments, which has a subsequent knock-on effect on traffic chaos and local resources. Nobody in authority is listening to the people that it affects. Cliff Morris, leader of Bolton Council. Are you?
I'm listening, yeah.
You're listening. He's listening. So Cliff's listening. Kevin, if you're watching on Facebook Live, the whole town is grinding to a halt on a daily basis, and allowing even more development will only exacerbate this. What can you do to help local residents of Horwich?
Well, Cliff's right. We are listening, and I think there's an acceptance that when that first draft of the spatial framework came out, there wasn't a convincing transport plan to support it, and therefore no wonder people just saw the houses but not how they were going to be supported with infrastructure. So we're in this process now where we're looking again at the whole thing, Kevin, and we've had a huge number of responses. I think 27,000 responses to the spatial framework across Greater Manchester, and we've published those. Of course, we need to build new homes, and it would be wrong for me to kind of say, it's all going to be easy, and we'll just stop doing all that. Well, we can't, can we? We can't go backwards. We need to build more homes. We need to bring in more jobs, higher quality jobs. So we need a plan for all of that. We need a plan for how Greater Manchester is going to change and develop. Because actually, if I'm going to go out there and win inward investment for Greater Manchester, I need to be able to show people that we know where we're going and we've got clarity about our future investment plans. But the first one wasn't right. I'm clear about that. We need to listen to what people are saying, and as I say, refocus the development on brownfield first. That said, there will still be difficult decisions. There is no doubt about that, and I'm not shying away from those, because in the end, we need to have a plan. But what I am doing is listening, and I'm trying my best to hear what people are saying and get the plan right. And actually, let me put it this way. If there is a difficult decision around a green site that people really support and are really frustrated because they think, well, it's just going to put more cars on the road, well, maybe that's where we can say, well, okay, well, if a tram stop opens up there or a train station opens up there, is that a kind of way of kind of meeting you and at least giving something back to the community? And it's those kind of things that I'm looking at as we rewrite the spatial framework, and we're looking to a date of June next year when the next draft will be out.
This is high stakes though, isn't it? Because if you come up with a plan that doesn't appear to meet the future housing need, then the developers have the potential to challenge that.
Yeah.
And if they succeed, then there could be a period where fields are up for grabs because you don't have a housing plan.
You put it well. Yeah, that's right. So if we're kind of if we just go for the kind of easy option and try and get the numbers right down, as you say, we could be turned over.
Because remember on that original plan that caused all the controversy, housing developers weren't happy with that. They thought there should have been tens of thousands more on that plan, didn't they?
They did. What we have now, though, is a couple of things that have happened which I think change it a little. So the government has come out with a new formula for how you assessed housing need. So it's changed the numbers that each local authority has to build. I can't remember Cliff's figures offhand, but it's a modest reduction, I think, in Bolton. So, a small few hundred reduction. There's another thing that's happened, of course, which is Brexit. I'm not making a point, remain or leave here, but the reality is Greater Manchester has downgraded its growth forecast for the next 20 years. So we were looking at about 2.5% growth. We're now looking at 1.5% growth. Obviously, there's a change then as also in terms of free movement and that change in population. So those things are kind of taking the pressure down a little bit, if you like, in terms of numbers. So those things will be factored in. But actually, as you say, the demand from house builders was far more. What we've got to do is get the figure right that's sustainable, linked to transport, and as I say, building homes where we're not just going to put more cars on the road. My great fear when I looked at that first draft of that spatial framework was we're going to end up in Greater Manchester with decaying town centres surrounded by urban sprawl with ever more cars on the road and air that's not fit to breathe. I mean, that just wasn't good enough in my point of view. We're on the way there anyway, and we need to get this plan right. We have to get it fundamentally refocused, and I just want to promise you all we're on with that work. But don't hear all of this as me saying, oh, and it's all going to be fine, there's going to be no controversial decisions. There still will be controversial decisions.
We've got a question down here on this.
I'm heartened to hear what you say about you prefer to build on brownfield sites. But in Bolton, on the original Greater Manchester Spatial Framework, it's a very large area, which doesn't just greenbelt, but it's a heritage asset. It's a Grade 2 listed parkland. Where would we stand? Where do you stand in putting that on in the scale of like brownfield first, very last perhaps, a heritage asset?
Well, to be honest, as part of this process, I'm also interested in, can we create new greenbelt? So areas that maybe aren't designated greenbelt at the moment, if some greenbelt is going to be lost somewhere, can we offset that by designating new greenbelt to give enhanced protection to areas that perhaps have those historical assets or the places of natural beauty that I described before? So, I'm interested in those debates and to see if we can. I don't know the specific one that you're referring to, but that's the kind of give and take that I'm looking at here. Can we if we're taking greenbelt there, can we compensate here? Because often, if we're honest, greenbelt isn't always greenbelt in your mind when you actually turn up and look at the site itself. Some areas that are designated greenbelt actually don't look it when you go there, whereas other areas that look it aren't. And we're going to have to look at all of those issues as part of this.
And often in this issue, sometimes it feels like a contradiction. Sometimes on Radio Manchester, one day we'll be talking about the spatial framework and people unhappy about plans to build houses. The next day we're talking about the crippling housing need and the shortage of homes. And the next day we're talking about homelessness.
Yeah, but the thing, we'll come on to that bit, but the thing is, Kevin, see, if you have a developer-led approach to the spatial framework, I don't think you necessarily get the right answer, because the homes that get built are not necessarily going to be the homes that people in Bolton or Wigan or Leigh can afford. And this is the thing, when you hear the housing debate, particularly when the government says, we're going to build X many thousand new homes, for me that doesn't solve the housing crisis, because if you build thousands and thousands of commuter homes, there's going to still be lots of people who can't afford those. I want a spatial framework that doesn't just build more homes. We need a spatial framework that solves the housing crisis. And there's a big difference between those two things. A spatial framework that builds the right size, the right affordable homes in the places where we can absorb it. That is a much trickier thing to do, but that's what we should be aiming to do. And as I say, there's a big difference between just building more homes and actually solving the housing crisis.
All right, we'll take another question. We've got Christian Bennett, who is here on the front. Mike's coming over to you, so loud and clear down the mic.
Right,
Yep, hiya mate.
My question is basically, every other week I get the train down to Wigan, and when I get out of the station and I look across the street, there's people sitting in the doorways or round the back of the train station because there's nowhere to live. And it's the same round here in Bolton, we're starting in places, so I'm just wondering what's the long-term plan to solve the homeless crisis like?
You're absolutely right. I think going back 10, 15 years, you just wouldn't have seen that in Wigan. You wouldn't have seen it here. Maybe the odd one. Yeah. I, as MP for Leigh, saw this growing in Leigh as well. Numbers were just slowly increasing. I got to know one of the lads who was always around Leigh, sleeping rough. I think his mum had died and he'd been forced out of the family home. That's how he'd ended up there. He used to be outside Tesco in Leigh on a regular basis. Used to buy him the odd thing when he was going in. Used to chat to him. I got the shock of my life a couple of months ago when I heard he died of pneumonia on the streets of Leigh. I mean, what's going on here? 2017, 31-year-old lads are dying on the streets of Greater Manchester. I mean, it's just beyond belief. And from my point of view, I've been saying this since I got elected, or in the campaign as well. This is a humanitarian crisis that's actually in front of us, and I'm not sure we're all kind of responding to it yet in the right way. So you're right to challenge me. I've set a goal of ending rough sleeping in Greater Manchester by 2020. So homelessness is a different challenge. Obviously, that's a longer term thing. Rough sleeping is, about giving in all communities somewhere safe, warm for people to go, so that they do not have to be out on the cold streets. We should be able to put a roof over every head every night of the week in this day and age. So we're on with that. Nationally, the government are saying 2027, 10 years' time, they'll end rough sleeping. Well, I'm just, maybe it's a risk to say this, but I'm saying we should know that's nowhere near good enough. So we're on with this plan. We've signed a new scheme with our 15 of our housing providers, where we're developing a housing first option. So we're developing this approach where we give people a home, but also the mental health support, the addiction support to take them away from the streets. This winter, great credit to the 10 councils of Greater Manchester. They have agreed to put in place an enhanced level of cold weather provision. So here, when the temperature drops below freezing on any night, emergency provision will be opened up. Nationally, it's 3 nights in a row that has to happen before they open their doors. Well, we're not doing that, we're doing it. And the fire service are helping out with us. We've got Tony Hunter from the fire service here tonight. They said, look, you can use some of our fire stations to help deliver this as well. So Greater Manchester is coming together behind this plan to end rough sleeping by 2020. And what I would just say to you all is, please help us. We're in a wonderful building here tonight. For me, it's not going to be the public sector alone that solves it. It's got to be a whole society response. Public, private, voluntary, faith, everybody, all sectors pulling together to do this. And if we do pull together, we can do it. It's a huge personal priority for me. And I promise you, we will do it. I've no doubt, I give you my word, we will do it. One way or another, we will do it.
Is it? Something that's come through on Radio Manchester is people wondering whether as much effort is going into the surrounding towns, the places like Leigh, where they may just have a few people, compared with Manchester, where there's so many.
I can promise you, Kevin, it is a Greater Manchester-wide initiative. Obviously, the problem is concentrated in the city centre, where the majority of rough sleepers are. But we've estimated there are at least, around 400 rough sleepers across all of Greater Manchester. And so it is about focusing on them in all of their communities. And I can tell you something tonight. The day I was elected, or came into office, I established the Mayor's Homelessness Fund. So I'm making a donation from my own salary every month to show that these aren't just words, it's deeds as well. We've raised, I think we're over £60,000 now in terms of what we've raised. Tomorrow we're going to confirm a grant for the Bolton Young People's Housing Project. So £6,000 from the Mayor's Homelessness Fund tomorrow, and that will support a supported place for a young person for a year. So we are, the money is, and Emmaus have had a grant as well serving the Bolton area. So it is everywhere, and it is GM wide, and we're working hard to tackle the problem. Okay.
Any more questions on homelessness? We'll just take one more.
Yeah.
The mic's working its way over.
Hi. I'm Richard Wilkinson. I'm a Bolton resident. I also work at Bolton Citizens Advice Bureau. The rate of claims for possession by social landlords, according to Ministry of Justice data, has trebled between 2007 and 2016. One of the major impacts of that is obviously the number of people being made homeless. Our experience shows that in several, or in fact in almost all the cases that we see where claims are made, there is often an easily resolvable problem, such as a missing benefit, a delay on benefit, or a benefit problem that can help prevent people being made homeless in the first place. Is there any plans or any prospect of enabling access to independent legal advice to prevent people from getting into these difficult situations in the first place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you're right, the changes to benefits have increased the number of evictions. Evidence from the Universal Credit pilot next door in Wigan, which I know well, has shown that massively gets worse. The number of people in rent arrears on Universal Credit rockets, and I don't think the changes the government has announced will really change that. So the rollout of Universal Credit is going to make this situation a whole lot worse. Then you've got the issue of private landlords, largely unregulated, who can evict people at the drop of a hat, which is a colossal failure by Parliament nationally over decades. So, yeah, these are real challenges. What do we do about those challenges? Legal advice, one thing. The credit unions actually across Greater Manchester have come to me with a proposal. They've come together to say they will offer loans to deal with the kind of period when people are not receiving benefits. And I think if we work with them on that, alongside the social landlords, to say, look, can you give people a period of grace so that we can recover the situation for them? I think we're going to have to look at all of that, if I'm honest, because for every person we might take off the streets through all the things we're doing that I've just mentioned, Universal Credit could put 2 more on. And that's the reality, I'm afraid. So you're absolutely right to challenge on that particular point.
Right, as I mentioned, we're broadcasting live on Facebook. We've been asking people to get in touch with their questions, so we're just going to take a couple of these. We'll quick fire through these. Loads of people getting in touch. Back on transport, lots of questions about more carriages on trains. Are there going to be more overcrowded and no seats on Bolton? You can deal with that very quickly in a moment. And then we've also got Shapiti Cafe on Twitter. This is business rates. They're saying, would you be able to do anything to help small businesses with business rates, because the system is just too crude and it punishes you if you're just on the threshold? So those two questions, nice and quick.
Yeah, on the business rates question, that's not something that is under my responsibility, to be honest. So that's a good politician's answer on that one. On more carriages, they are promised. I'm looking at Bob now from Transport for Greater Manchester.
Bob's taking his glasses off.
We had yeah, Bob can jump in here. We had a meeting with Northern Rail recently, specifically, and Amanda is here tonight from TFGM, is also there, specifically to kind of hold their feet to the fire on the improvements they're promising on your line. And they said there would be, I heard them correctly, longer trains by the end of next year. Was that right, Amanda?
Yeah, starting end of next year. So both Northern and Transpennine have new fleets of trains arriving. They're being built right now. We'll start to see the first ones hitting the network at the end of this year, but it takes some time to build. So you will start to see improvements in getting more seats and a reduction in that congestion by middle of next year, and full fleets in place by 2020.
And it's our job to hold them to account for that timetable, because we keep hearing promises, don't we, and they never come, and we know people have had chaos here. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for your questions so far. We've got loads to get through, so we're going to go to Chloe Gill now. Are you in the room, Chloe? If we could just get the mic over to Chloe. So this is a question about young people. Clearly, it's part of Andy's campaign promises. They were a big focus of what he was trying to do. All right.
Thank you. Hi, yeah, I'm a Bolton resident, but I'm from the West Midlands originally, and I moved here from London via Manchester. And in that time I've noticed a disparity across the UK and the Greater Manchester region of the access that children have to opportunities and life-enriching experiences. What strategies or initiatives can you implement to help children growing up in Bolton, help to give children growing up in Bolton the same aspirations and life chances as their peers elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I agree with you. I think there are many young people around Greater Manchester, here in Bolton as well, who they never go to the city centre, or they don't get the chance to experience what's going on there, partly because of the cost of transport. It's really expensive. I made a commitment in the campaign, Kevin will remember, maybe many of you will, to a free bus pass for 16 to 18-year-olds. And that will be delivered as part of the reform of buses that I was talking about before. When the buses were deregulated in the mid-80s, there were 350 million bus journeys in Greater Manchester. It's now fallen down to beneath 200 million a year. And it just makes sense to get a new generation back on the buses, to get growing those numbers again. So that's one reason for doing it, to grow the market for bus usage. But the main reason actually is to send a simple message to every young person in Greater Manchester that at the end of school, there is something there for them. We're going to back them to get on and explore and go out there and see what this place has got to offer, get to the studying opportunities, get to the work opportunities. So we are going to do that. It's going to take a little time to do it as we use these powers that we've got, but I'm absolutely committed to that. But then the key is, for me, link the transport to the opportunities that are out there. So the Combined Authority has just launched something called Bridge GM. Go online and look it up. It's a system that is asking employers to give opportunities to young people in terms of work experience, mentoring, these kind of things. And we're going to build this system so that young people can access those opportunities in the world of work. Particularly young people perhaps who don't have mentors within the family. And that's the whole idea. In the end, what I would like in Greater Manchester is what I call a UCAS-style system for apprenticeships. I want it to be as easy for a young person who wants a technical qualification to find out about them as it is for somebody going to university to apply through UCAS. if you can see where I'm going with that. So a system where all of the apprenticeships in Greater Manchester would be on a single system where they could see what subjects were needed and what grades the employers wanted, and then they could apply for it in exactly the same way as people apply for university. And for me, that would do a lot to lift aspirations of young people, because at the moment they can't see where school is taking them, and they don't feel that they, even if they could see an opportunity, they couldn't see how they could pay for it to get there. And I'm trying to break through all of that.
Got another question. Is it a question about young people there at the back? Yeah, the mic's coming over. So just introduce yourself.
Stephanie Quinn, representing Fairtrain, who audit and accredit the quality of work experience and apprenticeships. And so it's just going off the back of what you said about employees being able to advertise apprenticeships and that all be in one place. A lot of employers can and do exploit the apprenticeship wage, which you know can add to household income and cause further challenges there. So if we're encouraging more employers to take on apprentices, how are we going to monitor the effectiveness of that apprenticeship and also that it doesn't cause further issues for the household?
Now, just remind everybody in the audience who may not know what the apprenticeship wage is, because it is, I think, shockingly low, isn't it? £3.50 an hour. Does everybody realise that? So young people who are on apprenticeships are getting paid £3.50 an hour.
To add to that, it's not just young people. Adults within their first year of an apprenticeship are also paid that wage, potentially.
And then if you go back to what I was saying before about the cost of bus travel in Greater Manchester, you know, how on earth do people make that work? I remember once meeting a young person who had an apprenticeship at McDonald's, I think it was, who said to me, she walked 6 hours to work in the morning and 6 hours back in the evening. 6 miles, sorry. Probably took 6 hours. It's really not right. So again, it's a limit always to what we can do, and there's no point in us promising the earth if we can't do it. However, we have done something. So through the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, the public bodies of Greater Manchester, National Health Service, Police, we've got the Chief Constable here this evening, and others, have committed to paying at least the minimum wage as opposed to the apprenticeship wage. So obviously that is significantly better. And through that leadership, we're trying to encourage other employers to follow suit. How can young people get on with that as the money that they're bringing in? They just can't, can they? So I'm going to stick to this theme of saying we must focus on young people to help them make their way in the world. And this, for me, is the point of devolution. You know, Westminster has cut support for young people over many, many years, and it's our chance through devolution to try and reverse that and put that investment back into them. Because how can we build a Greater Manchester with the skills that we need, the workforce of the future, if we're kind of giving young people a ladder where all the rungs are missing off it and they can't make their way in the world? We just can't do that. So this is the reason why we're making these changes.
We'll take one more question down here.
I'm Steph Sherrett. I'm a mum of a disabled adult in Bolton. What are you going to do about raising the aspirations for young disabled people who apprenticeships are not available to and whose aspirations may not be academically based?
Yeah. You're really asking an important question. So the figures, I'm talking about learning disability here, but the figures nationally for adults with learning disability and employment are 6%. Shamefully, here it's 3%. I think if you look at adults with autism, they're probably a bit better, but not much better. Obviously, people with physical disabilities, again, a bit better, but not hugely better. This is real social exclusion, isn't it? And I think we've got to try and do something about it. So I don't know. I mean, I'd be interested to hear what people think, but people have put to me the idea of a supported apprenticeship where employers would sign up to offer supported apprenticeships where, more time be provided or more support as part of the apprenticeship. We're looking at having an employers' charter in Greater Manchester where we get our good employers to sign up to basic standards, and that idea could form part of that. And obviously those supported apprenticeships could be offered through the UCAS system that I mentioned.
But you have to get at least a C in maths and English. Oh, sorry. You have to get at least a C or whatever the new system is in maths and English. I'm talking about the young people, young disabled people who can't get that, but are still capable and want to work, to enjoy, to be part of society, to give something back, to earn and you know, to have whatever level of independence that they're capable of.
Well, I definitely see what you're saying. I think we should look at a Greater Manchester scheme of supported apprenticeships. Work with our employers outside of all of that stuff nationally. So that's what I'm talking about. It wouldn't necessarily be easy, and we'd have to kind of find employers that were willing to work with us. But I think it's an idea that we should work on, because those figures, if you think of those figures for adults with learning disabilities, they are frankly disgraceful.
All right, we'll take one more question in this section. He's behind you. He's coming up.
My name is John Falk. I work in an industry that is a massive apprenticeship provider. It's huge in the northwest, it's huge in the southwest. It's called the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry, for those of you who don't know, is being murdered by this disaster called Brexit. Okay? The treaties that run this industry are being unilaterally destroyed by this government, to the point where it won't be able to operate. We won't be able to buy parts, we won't be able to get help, we won't be able to buy fuel, and we won't be allowed to move waste. It will stop, and that's 20% of the electricity generation. It's also a huge employer of young people, because they bring people right through the industry from the bottom to the top. A lot of the CEOs are ex-apprentices, for example. It's a shining example of what needs to be done. What are you going to do to influence your party in the direction of stopping this disastrous Brexit, as Sadiq Khan has asked you to do?
Let's look at the way Greater Manchester voted first. It was very split when it came to the referendum. But actually, it was actually more clear than the national result. So 7 of our boroughs, if you look at them in totality, voted to leave. 3 voted to remain. Now, as I've got to be a mayor for everybody, and I've got to bring Greater Manchester back together. I don't think we're going to help ourselves as a society if we keep rerunning these arguments and keep widening these divisions between us. And it's my job, it seems to me, rather than kind of still playing Westminster politics. I've left that world behind, and I'm glad to have left it behind, quite honestly. I think Westminster created Brexit, in my view, because it neglected parts of the country like these, like the constituency I used to represent. It didn't help those areas recover from the loss of mining and other big industries, and because of that they felt neglected, and they felt Westminster and Brussels wasn't working, so other reasons, but that was one of the reasons why. And so for me, I've kind of left that, and I think devolution is the answer to where we are right now. More power locally, doing things more for ourselves. I don't think it is my job to carry on playing those games. People voted. It's my job to make sure that Greater Manchester isn't disadvantaged and has a kind of Brexit situation that works for us. So I want to look at our key industries. You've mentioned one, but we could add in digital and tech, advanced manufacturing. We could add in life sciences. My worry is, this is my big worry, I think, given the way Westminster works and what I know about it, we're going to end up with a London-centric Brexit, where the City of London is prioritised above all other industries, and actually those other industries are made to pay a price for what's given to the City of London. And this is why we had this whole debate about the sectoral analysis, and David Davis not publishing the sectoral analysis. It's going to be my job to ensure we have the right regulatory regime for those industries where people work in Greater Manchester. So that, I'm afraid, I'm going to give you a more pragmatic response, rather than kind of continually fighting the Westminster fight about remain or leave. It just seems to me that's the instruction I've got from the GM public, not to carry on dividing them, but to try and bring them back together and make this thing work here.
Since you've taken that direction, can I ask you a little wider question? How are you going to replace the millions? How are you going to replace the millions of pounds that the EU currently spends in the area, and once we've left, we'll be gone? Cornwall voted Brexit. They've now changed their minds completely. Grimsby saying, oh, can we have an exclusion from Brexit? Because we'll have no market for our fish anymore. So how are you going to replace that funding? Westminster is not going to give you the replacement funding that the EU is currently giving you.
Well, they've said they will. So they've said they will create what's called a shared prosperity fund, which will be broadly the same size as what's called ERDF. I mean, I share some of your fears. I do. I mean, you know, I do. I voted Remain. I share many of your fears. But I don't think at this stage fighting it is the right thing. Maybe 2 years down the line, it might look very different. And when we see the reality of it, maybe then the Great Manchester public may come to me and say, do you know what, we see the reality of this deal now, and it looks very different to us, because that wasn't what we were told at the referendum. Now, let's see what happens, let that play out, but we aren't at that place today. It's my job to try and bring people together and make this thing work for people here and for our industries here.
All right, lots to run on that one, isn't there? I'm sure we'd all agree on that one. Okay, so one of Andy's big responsibilities, the thing he does have direct influence over here in Greater Manchester, is the police. We've got a question from Sue Haworth. Is Sue around? Yeah, she's there at the back. We'll get the mic over to you, Sue.
Thank you. Many of the people that live in Bolton and in Farnworth, in fact, all over the borough, have really valued for years neighbourhood policing. It's tackled antisocial behaviour, and neighbourhood policing has had its role in dealing with crime. There's no question about that. And I'm one of the elected members, and what I do hear from people who live in my ward is they've just seen less neighbourhood policing. They just don't feel the same police presence that they're used to. And of course, they are aware from the media that there have been terrible police cuts that we all regret, because we all hugely support the police. But I don't want policing and crime to slip down your priority agenda. I'm thinking of what the people in my ward say to me, and that is one of them. It's a priority for them. The victims of crime are a priority. People never forget the victims of crime. And it makes a huge difference when there's crime in their neighbourhoods. So my question really focuses in on what sometimes I'm asked, which is, look, you know, we feel a bit away from the centre of things, on the outer area of Greater Manchester. So do we, in Bolton, do we get enough of the big budget, the Greater Manchester budget, for both staffing and the other finance that's needed in Greater Manchester Police? Are we getting a good enough funding, if you like, for neighbourhood policing here? Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I'm laughing a little there. I was just looking at the Chief Constable and I was thinking, oh, that's an easy one for me to... Oh, the old politician's hospital pass, that's called. But I will answer my bit of your question. Maybe Ian would like to add something at the end. I'm very proud that Beverly Hughes is the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime. Beverly worked with me when we were in David Blunkett's team in the Home Office a decade or more ago, where we were building neighbourhood policing back up and putting police community support officers on our streets. And I happen to believe they were a really important innovation that made policing more visible in all communities, alongside, of course, the full warranted officers. You know, there was a big investment in neighbourhood policing. What we're seeing now is it being eroded year on year because of the cuts. Now, I think Ian and his colleagues are doing well, as best they can, to insulate frontline policing from those cuts, but they can't completely do that. So we've lost, I think, 2,000 officers or more. Ian will give you the exact figures. The truth is, and again, I'm not here to make political points because I've left all that point scoring behind. I'm just going to deal in facts. GMP have now had 7 years of cuts, 7 years of real terms cuts. And we have the policing settlement, which we announced in Parliament next week. And I'm confidently predicting there'll be an 8th year of real terms cuts for Greater Manchester Police. Now, as you're rightly saying, Sue, something has got to give when that is carrying on year, and the give is going to be public safety, community safety. Because we have been through a year where there have been major, terrible events in our in our city, where policing has been drawn into the centre, and rightly so in those moments. But then other things are being compromised, aren't they? And we're at that position now where they haven't got anything left to give. The police officers I speak to are, well, they are giving everything, but they can't give a lot more, given the way the pressure has increased on them. So, you know, this is the argument we have tried to make, but my fear is we are at a point where we're going to get more cuts next week. And I have to be honest with you all, what do I then do? What do Beverly and I do in this situation? You know, there's council tax decisions coming up next year. No one likes talking about it. But you need to tell me. I mean, my feeling is people don't want to compromise on policing. So we need to raise as much as we can locally to mitigate these cuts. But this is a difficult judgment we've got to make. We've got to wait and see what the settlement is first. But I fear it's not going to be good. And then we're going to have to come to you all with a difficult choice about what we then do about it. But that's the position that we're in.
The suggestion is, isn't it, that the government may well say, well, we're not giving you any more money, but we will allow you to, we'll release the limit on how much council tax you can put up. So would as mayor you think, right, well, I'm going to put council tax up to fund the police?
It's really good of them, that, isn't it? You know, to say, oh yeah, we're not going to raise taxes nationally, but you can do it at local. Thanks for, yeah. But you can't fund policing on that basis, because do you know why not? We can't raise as much from council tax as Theresa May's police force down in Thames Valley, or Philip Hammond's. You know, we can't raise the same amount of money, so it's all right for them to say that. But when you look at an area like Greater Manchester, we can't fill the gap. So that, I'm afraid, is a kind of self-serving position. But I'm not going to rule it out, because I can't rule it out. You know, there is a link, in my view, between neighbourhood policing and the more serious forms of crime, including terrorism. When we are living in a situation where extremism is more coming out of lone operators in a community level, you can't say that there's no link between those two things. The government just keeps saying, we'll protect the counter-terrorism budget, but policing can be cut. Well, I don't agree with that at all. And the Chief Constable maybe can say something himself about the balance across GM. From my point of view, you know, you just can't, you can't make those self-serving arguments when it comes to the police. The Chief Constable has said that our numbers are at the low end of reasonable. Well, I put his phrase in a slightly different way. It's borderline unreasonable, therefore. And that's where we are. And we're already there, and we're about to get more cuts. And it's not a good, I'm afraid it's not a happy picture at all.
Has anybody else got any questions on policing, on antisocial behaviour, on the kind of safeness you feel within your community or not? We've got a question down here again at the front. The mic's coming over.
I'm just going to say, everything you mention in housing, everything, transport and that, okay, terrorism, that is it. But the thing is, it's the antisocial behaviour, because there's poverty, because there's nobody to get them into people into jobs, disabled and that, they're on drugs and that, because it's the poverty parts of Greater Manchester that we need to teach the children coming up to live together with the elderly and learn from one another, learn about disabilities, learn about mental health, learn about everything, to come together and help one another, instead of saying, oh, they're poor, it's all right, there's all this antisocial behaviour. We need to go back to, I'm 63 now, so you need to go back to commas, link together, work together, build the jobs. I mean, we've heard about Royal Bank of Scotland. The Royal Bank of Scotland are losing. Where are the jobs going to come from? Because you're online, because you've got this technology, where are the jobs going to come from? And we need to start in the schools to educate. And we mustn't forget, I'm sorry, but you sound like I'm on my soapbox. We mustn't forget the elderly. We mustn't forget the elderly, the care that they need as well. Can't the young work with the elderly like they do abroad to understand and learn together?
You put it really well. And I think the single biggest thing we could do in the long term to prevent and tackle crime is, as I was saying before, give every young person leaving school in Greater Manchester hope that they have a future, that there is something there for them. That is the single biggest thing that we could do. And we can't do that overnight, but we are beginning to see how we can do that. But you are absolutely right. We need to bring this society of ours back together a bit more, where we help and support each other, particularly across the ages. I don't know whether Ian wants to say a little bit about policing.
I'm from Network Circle for Deafness, and I'm independent peer advocate, and we do it all voluntary. Okay.
You're doing it very well.
Thank you.
Are we going to have Beverly Hughes have a quick word on this?
Hello everybody, I'm Bev Hughes, I'm the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, and I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the comments from Sue and from this lady down here, because you asked, particularly Sue, whether Andy and I have a priority for neighbourhood policing, and I wanted to say emphatically, yes, we do, and so does the Chief Constable. It's also true that losing a quarter of our police officers over the last 7 years and a similar proportion of PCSOs and police support staff, it's increasingly difficult, and that degree of neighbourhood policing is wearing thin in some places. We're completely honest with you about that. But we're not just doing nothing about that. We're trying firstly to change the way officers in the neighbourhood work so that they follow a case right through. We're kind of working towards that model, so that will give a better service to people, we hope. But also across Greater Manchester, and this picks up your very important point about how these kinds of issues are connected with lots of other things in localities. So we're trying to build a multi-agency approach, including the police, housing, local authority, bring the schools in, and there's some really good examples of where this is working well. And what that means is that, you know, it's the kind of problem like antisocial behaviour in an area, say. It's not just the police going to try and sort that out. Yes, the police need... You need a sustained response with the getting involved, youth workers, bringing the parents in. And I've seen that happening, particularly in Wigan, at Platt Bridge. So trying to get more for our resources by people working together. You asked particularly about whether Bolton's getting its fair share of the police resources that we do have. Comment on that a bit.
Thank you. There's nothing left to say after listening to Bev and Andy. They've done it all. So your question was brilliant. And can I just thank everybody, because the point that you made about the support that you all give to the police, actually that is so important to us, and it makes British policing the envy of the world, that relationship that we have with our local communities. In 2 weeks' time, I'll have been a police officer for 29 years. You don't get anybody more committed to local policing than me and neighbourhood policing. It is wearing thin, you know, because of the points that have been made. You know, I've been building a model in the 2 and a bit years since I've been the Chief Constable, where we're trying to put as much resource locally to work with partners as Bev describes, because that is where we get the most return on our investment. And you know, there's a lot of research coming out, particularly around young people, and we've been talking about them tonight, around things that affect them in their childhood, adverse childhood experiences where, you know, there's parental separation, or there's drugs or alcohol or sexual or physical abuse. If you're a young person and you've got 4 of those in your life, you're 20 times more likely to be imprisoned in your lifetime than somebody has 1. So, you know, single agency working doesn't solve the problems that we've got. So, you know, working with Cliff and Margaret locally, we are absolutely committed to that. The other thing that we are really wrestling with is, you know, as I go back over my sort of 29 years of policing experience, the world of crime is changing massively. And, you know, as I was growing up as a young officer and we were learning about how to solve problems, you worked on a triangle that had on each of the points of the triangle your location, your offender, and your victim. I'm now working with that triangle where I might have a victim that is on a different continent, that has been brought through various countries to this country, that is now a victim on our streets, and the offender lives somewhere else. It is hugely, hugely complex. And you're not just seeing that in things like modern slavery and human trafficking. You're seeing it in serious and organised crime. You're seeing the online abuse of young people. You know, there's an awful lot talked about street grooming of children. They are more at risk in their bedroom from the IT that they're using than they are from being abused on the streets. So all of that is changing the way that we have to operate. can't do that sort of stuff at a local level. I have to brigade those specialist capabilities more at a borough level like Bolton, but then at a force and a regional level. Now, in terms of the broader question about Bolton, actually it's my second busiest division. And in terms of the level of resourcing, it gets a fair and proportionate amount. We work very closely with Margaret and her team and Cliff here at Bolton. We have a very good relationship. The bottom line is, I've got 2,000 less officers than I did 7 years ago. And just to explain the bit about why council tax won't fix the issue, and I do want Andy to put it up, I'll be really honest about that, because, you know, inflation's running at 3.5%. So I will face a cut if he doesn't. But the budget for Greater Manchester Police is made up, 83% of it comes from government grant and 17% from the council tax.
This is the key point.
And all the cuts have been on the grant. So we've been disproportionately affected in Greater Manchester than other parts of the country where, you know, I was talking to a chief yesterday who is in the eastern region. His grant is 53% and his council tax is 47%. So if they put their council tax up by 1%, they get 1.3 million. If we put ours up by 1%, we get 1 million. And yet we're 3 times the size of that area. So the council tax won't fix it. It helps paper over the cracks, but it won't fix the fundamental problem.
What I take from that is Bolton might be getting more than its fair share, so I'll have to have a look at that. I'm joking. I'm joking. And Kevin, I'm going to say very quickly, they don't have the numbers that they need for the reasons that we've just explained. But I've seen from Ian downwards, Greater Manchester Police give their all this year, and genuinely, I think they deserve huge credit from us all, and you've got that.
All right, thank you for that. So we've got about 15 minutes left. We've got a couple more questions booked in on the floor, and then we'll open it up. But very quickly, we'll just take one from George on Facebook. Hopefully he's still watching, George. He says, are you still committed to giving a voice to young people? We've talked a lot about young people, but what are you doing to ensure that they can contribute?
We've agreed to set up a youth combined authority to mirror the main combined authority. So that's going to be a body of young people drawn from all 10 of our boroughs. And what I'm not going to do is what we've done in the past, I just patronise them, let them meet and then just ignore them. We're going to give them a real job to do, delivering the free bus pass, the UCAS system. That's what we're going to do, and we'll set it up early in the new year.
All right, we've got a question from Sally Cooper now. Is Sally here? Now, obviously, we talked a little bit about access and about people with disabilities. You're not responsible for health, but you've got a voice at the table, haven't you? And lots of changes going on in terms of devolution in Greater Manchester. So the mic's come to you now, Sally. Tell us what you think.
Good evening, Andy.
Good evening.
We've talked today about transport, we've talked about housing, we've talked about young people and their experiences and what needs to happen for them. But are you aware that Bolton CCG have made the eligibility criteria for NHS wheelchairs, manual wheelchairs I'm talking about now, not electric wheelchairs, so restrictive that unless you use it full-time both in your house and outdoors, you are no longer fit to fit that criteria. This is detrimental to disabled people's and children's well-being. There's no point having nice wheelchair spaces on a bus. There's no point putting the best carers in the world in place if the person cannot get out of their house in a manual wheelchair to the outdoors. That involves education, work, volunteer work, going seeing your parents, going seeing your grandparents. If you haven't got a wheelchair to sit in the first place, where do we start as a country that we actually say to people, we're no longer giving you the autonomy to leave your house?
All right then. So on that, clearly the NHS is under financial pressure, but what about some of the changes they're bringing in?
Well, I don't know the detail, but I'm sorry if I'm going to upset somebody from the CCG here. It sounds completely wrong to me what they are doing. And it's one of those worst kind of cuts that I used to see when I was health secretary, where they go straight for prevention. Why on earth do that? Surely keep funding the things that get people out and about and improve their quality of life and their well-being, because then you'll prevent ill health. Don't cut away the thing that helps them live their life so they then end up getting ill and getting stuck in a hospital bed. And this is where the health service so often gets it wrong. It cuts the wrong things. So I don't know all the detail, but I'll look into it for you. And actually, I'll look into it. And if it is as it sounds, I will strongly support what you're saying, which is that they should absolutely not go down that path. Agreed.
We got Sean Milligan, a question from Sean. Are you here tonight, Sean? Sean's not here, but the question from Sean. We see a lot of information about schemes happening in Manchester city centre, however, very little about the other outer areas of Greater Manchester. Why is this?
There is a lot going on in the city centre, and I don't think we should always kind of say, or, you know, set the city centre against everywhere else, because we all benefit when the city centre's doing well, don't we? And, you know, I don't resent, I'm proud of the city centre. However,
that was part of your pitch, though,
yeah,
wasn't it?
it was, yeah. So my view is the city centre has got a lot of momentum now, hasn't it? And it's really powering on. So now let's get our focus on the outlying areas and the town centre challenge that I spoke about. Because obviously, you know, the city centre can look after itself now, and it's now we need to do the same for the outlying areas that we did do for the city centre 20 years ago and kickstart regeneration. So, you know, people might say, well, where's the evidence of it? I did mention Bolton Interchange. I don't know if everyone's been there. I went there the other week. It is a pretty impressive facility.
They built that before you took over, though, didn't they?
I can't claim, well, I'm
Bolton
trying to claim credit for it, of course.
That was Cliff, yeah.
Cliff can take claim credit. But also, Cliff has put forward a plan around, and the council, Margaret, the chief executive, around the ambitious redevelopment of Bolton Town Centre. Part of that will actually mean that the old bus station has got to be released to provide the land for some of that redevelopment. What I can say to you is I will support Cliff and then the new leader of Bolton Council 100% in backing that plan for the redevelopment of Bolton. I love Bolton. I've had a lot of links here over the years. You know, all of my constituents used to support Bolton Wanderers. I've got lots of reasons to be favourable to Bolton. I would love to see the Bolton I knew as a kid that I used to come shopping here with my gran. I'd love to see Bolton Town Centre really have a period now of real renaissance, and I think that is absolutely possible with the plans that the council have been putting forward.
Well, Kat Mears has been in touch on Facebook. She's not bothered about Bolton. She wants to know what you're doing for Farnworth.
Well, maybe Cliff wants to answer this question.
Oh, wait, we'll bring the mic over to you. Let's get the camera on, Cliff.
We've asked that to be the town centre challenge, because we know we need it. Farnworth is a challenge to us. So that's the place we've designated for the challenge with Andy.
So that's going to get some extra
Bolton
attention.
Council have put forward Farnworth to me. So in the new year, I'll be getting together a meeting just on Farnworth with all of the landowners, everyone who's interested in contributing to its redevelopment, so that we can kickstart some new thinking and get some plans coming through. So that's what we're doing for Farnworth.
They'll be pleased in Farnworth. Right, we've got a few minutes left. Is any general questions? People want to get their hands up, we can come to you. So we've got a question down here. The mic's coming over. So just tell us your name and fire away.
My name's Michelle. I work for Health Watch, Bolton and Wigan and Lee. I'm really interested in your young people. I've got a child with disabilities, but we're here today to talk about giving young carers a voice. We've done a piece of work giving them a voice in our local area, and we've interviewed a lot of young carers. And to give them a voice, we've had a local singer-songwriter write a song using their experiences, which is going to be launched in the next couple of weeks. And we'd like to invite you to come and meet the young carers in January, because they're going to share their voice themselves at the Octagon Theatre. So if you're free, Andy, come down.
All right, okay. I'm laughing because my diary secretary's standing right there, and I looked at Michelle, who lives in Bolton actually, and we just laughed because there's a lot of pressure on the diary. But if I can, I will, because I am passionate about supporting young carers. Wigan and Lee young carers were a real cause close to my heart. I ran the Wigan 10K for them a year or two ago. Young carers, I think, face some of the kind of roughest odds of all, don't they? You know, they are really having to kind of put their own lives on hold and other things, and they're often living hidden lives. So I am real passionate supporter of supporting young carers, and the National Health Service here, the NHS and Care Partnership, are bringing forward a new carers guarantee in the new year. So we want to make sure that young carers have very specific guarantees as part of that. But if I can come to the Octagon in January, I will.
Thank you very much.
Right, loads of hands going up now. The first one I saw was the chap over there, and then we'll come to you behind him next. Do you want to you ask a question, then pass it back? We'll get two quick fire answers.
Okay, Andy, how do you feel about the suggestion of, back to spatial framework, inviting local people around Greater Manchester to put their ideas, rebalance developers had in the first version, they had to go putting their land forward, first, let local people suggest the land that they think should be put forward for a nature improvement area. In other words, they identify green land that they want to protect.
Okay, pass the mic just behind you.
That's before June. Don't wait till June. But involve them before the second version is put together, because it's that cynicism that we aren't consulted before the plan's developed.
We'll just take one more question. We'll answer these.
Hi, Andy. I just wondered if you'd had an opportunity to read the Anderson report into the into the Manchester bombing, and what your thoughts were on the report, and whether you knew whether there was going to be an independent report written about the bombing, as this was the police, looking internally at themselves. So I just wondered if you knew if there was going to be an independent report into the counter-terrorist police and the MI5.
Okay, that's an important question. Just to deal quickly with the one before, we've had 27,000 responses to the spatial framework. Lots of those contained ideas of the kind that you're discussing. So in the new year, I'll be open to meeting local groups as we get towards that position when we come forward with the rewrite, so no problem. Very serious question, though, from the gentleman at the back. For those who don't know, a very serious and quite difficult read came out last week, the Anderson report, into what principally MI5 knew about the attack at the arena. It also looked at the London Bridge attack and the Finsbury Park attack at the same time. Without going into all the details, the individual who carried it out was known to them, had been looked at. Some intelligence was received on this person earlier this year, and a decision was taken at the time that it wasn't going to be pursued. Now, obviously, hindsight's a wonderful thing. The people in the security service do an incredibly difficult job, but it would appear to be that wasn't the right judgment in retrospect. It also pointed to other things that happened where checks were not put on so that he was questioned at the port when he came back in through the country. So I've met most of the families now who lost loved ones, and I can tell you that obviously it's an incredibly difficult read for them. But you can't say actually that those things would have prevented it either. You know, it's not possible to say that. It wasn't just an internal report. Anderson was an independent person brought in to challenge what they were saying. And I met him last week, and he did challenge. I know you're shaking your head, but honestly, I can assure you he did challenge them. I know David Anderson. He's nobody's kind of yes man. He is an independent QC. He did challenge them. The security services don't normally open up like this at all, and they have opened up. Okay, it's not as fully transparent as possibly as you would like, but we maybe are moving to a situation where there'll be inquest soon, and even possibly a public inquiry. So the story is going to carry on coming through. I commissioned also a report into the response on the night and in the days afterwards. The response by the police, the ambulance service, the fire service. That's been led by somebody called Lord Bob Kerslake, and that will report in the first half of next year. So, as difficult as it is, we have to give people the full facts as best as we can determine them. And I am personally committed to making sure that is what happens.
Okay, time for one more question. This guy who's had his hand up all the way through that, yeah.
Hi Andy, I'm Niall from the Blair Project. I go into Manchester quite a lot, and you just see there's loads of empty properties like flats and apartments, and they're all seem to be being bought by hedge funds. Is there anything we can do to stop this? It's just, there could be, as you say, there could be homeless people that could be put into those apartments, or anybody that would like to live into Manchester, but they're all empty properties. Is there anything we could do about this?
There was a focus until recently on that kind of development, and that was partly supported by this fund that we received from the government. They kind of skewed the fund to support that type of development. But under the direction of the City Mayor of Salford, Paul Dennett, who's now leading on housing and planning for Greater Manchester, we're going to bring forward in the new year quite a big change in our approach to housing, where we're not just funding the building of those kind of properties that you mentioned. So look out for that in the new year. It will mark a big departure. As I say, we need a housing policy to solve the housing crisis. And that is, I say, it's a big change from where we've been, which is the housing policy to build more houses. So it's on the way, is what I say.
And last question, sorry guys, we've run out of time now, but last quick question from Neil on Twitter. It could divide people, this. As you're in Bolton, can you start the whip round for a Big Sam statue?
Oh my God. That's a very controversial question from me right now, and maybe we will come to love him in the way that you all do. Can I just say, Kevin, it's been brilliant discussion, great questions. Sorry we didn't get to all of them, but you've all turned out on a cold night. I really appreciate it. The thing that I just want to say in closing is, this isn't just, obviously it's partly about me and asking me questions and all of that. The way I see it though, this has got to be about all of us, this process of devolution. The gentleman at the back asked me, are we going to work with communities with the spatial framework? Yes, and also we're going to work on homelessness with charities who are working in homelessness. On digital and tech, we had a big summit last week where we're asking those businesses and organisations to help us write a policy to develop that industry. Young people are describing, we're bringing their voices in. This is the way we're trying to work, building this whole thing from the bottom up. And that's what these events are about tonight. So, if anything has interested you, get involved in some way, because the more we open it out to people, the stronger this whole thing will become. And I passionately believe, having left that Westminster world, this is the best chance that Greater Manchester and the north of England will ever get. Number one, to do things differently, do things our way rather than their way. That is, support young people differently, have challenging plans on homelessness, things that we want to see happen. But also, do things differently, but get the voice of the north of England heard more loudly than it's been heard before. And that is what I'm trying to do, working with the Mayor of the Liverpool City region and other northern leaders, getting the rail investment that we need. Also, when the government came back to me recently with that answer on the cost of the arena attack, when it wasn't good enough, I challenged them and use the power that we get, that London have had for years through their mayor. Well, that's what I'm trying to do as well, and get our voice heard and rebalance this country from south to north. I really kind of feel the more that people buy into it, the stronger this whole thing will become. I'm not going to get everything right, and you won't agree with everything that I do. I obviously wouldn't expect that, nor would you. But actually, if we can broadly agree where we're going as Greater Manchester, and actually really get this place talked about, create a real excitement about it. Nationally, there's a lot of negative energy. We've got a chance here to create something really positive at our level. And I just would say, as we end this difficult year, but look to the next one, let's really kind of do that together, because the more we do it, the stronger we're all going to be in the future. So thanks to you all, and again, thanks very much to you, Kevin.